afternoon, committee. We'll get started in just a few minutes late, but we're doing all right. Hey, we're up on the system, so that's positive. Are there bill introductions? Secretary Lorenz.
Thank you, Chairman. Julie Lorenz, Secretary of the Kansas Department of Transportation. I'm here today to request the introduction of RS 727. This is a cleanup bill, essentially. A couple of small items related to IKE, the program that was passed last year. With three goals pertaining to this legislation. First, to lower the restrictions within IKE. There is currently a threshold requirement of $100 million in order to do alternative delivery kinds of projects. We're seeking to take that threshold down to 10 million. Some of that's related to stimulus funding, but also we've worked closely with the contracting community, and they are also seeking that change. So we are in alignment on that. The second is and the second one is very cautionary. We are on good pace to deliver the T-Works projects as required under IKE, and we anticipate letting the first phase of all of those by the end of 21. However, if we are to receive stimulus funds, if we wanted to advance a couple of projects, we want the ability to do that this summer. So we're seeking under stimulus funding an exemption to that, but only if we get stimulus. And the third is a technical cleanup clarification related to how we calculate our debt cap. And it's to bring into alignment the calculation so that it's consistent with the rating agency's test.
Are there questions? Seeing none, is there objection? Without objection, it's introduced. Thank you. Are there other bill introductions? Seeing none, we'll open the hearing on House Bill 2014, which permits military surplus vehicles to register with the Division of Motor Vehicles for road use. Revisor Wagner, would you brief us on this bill, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Hope everyone can hear me. Chris Wagner from the Revisor's Office. Committee, House Bill 2014 allows a person to register a military surplus vehicle with the Division of Vehicles for road use. The bill would create a new definition for military surplus vehicle, and it states that these vehicles are any that has 3 axles or fewer, meets the legal size and weight limits established in KSA 8-1902, 1904, 1908, and 1909. The vehicle is less than 35 years old, and the vehicle was manufactured for use in the U.S. military or any other country's military with substantially similar vehicle standards as the U.S. military. And then that vehicle is later offered to sale to civilians. And finally, these vehicles do not include fully tracked vehicles, so no tanks or anything like that. Section 3 is the more substantive part of the bill. It provides that vehicles will be treated similarly as special interest vehicles or street route vehicles. These are typically older vehicles registered that are over 20 years of age that have been updated by collectors from the original equipment. These vehicle types are allowed general road usage like other vehicles, but they may not transport passengers for hire or haul material weighing more than 500 pounds. However, military surplus vehicles, this was actually a discussion last session, they are not treated similar in that way. They will be able to haul loads that are more than 500 pounds. The cost of registration is a annual $26 fee and a one-time processing fee of $20 for the license plate. An additional requirement is that owners of military surplus vehicles must have one or more other vehicles registered with the division that can be used for regular transportation. And then finally, Section 3 goes on to state that military surplus vehicles shall not be registered until a VIN inspection has been completed by the Kansas Highway Patrol in accordance with KSA 8-116A. I'd like to just additionally note for the committee, as probably be a common theme, this was a repeat bill from last session with some changes that were either made in this committee or on the Senate side. But the bill passed the House 122-0 and passed out of the Senate committee with amendments mainly dealing with the axle requirement and the size and weight limits. So I'd answer any questions the committee has.
Other questions? Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chris, for that. So this bill is the repeat of the original bill last year or the bill after it was amended in the committees?
And Chris Wagner from the Rogers Office. This is the bill with those additional requirements. So the 3-axle or fewer requirement and that these vehicles meet the legal size and weight limits. So it's with all of the amendments.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Delperdang.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chairman. For the revisor here, do you have any feel? Yeah, it is. Do you have any feel or concept as far as how many vehicles involved? And I don't mean what I've heard. This is kind of directed toward Humvees, and I don't mean there's 100 Humvees out here, but rather how many different types of vehicles could this encompass?
I think the division, I'm not quite sure on the statistic, but I think they're kind of sure how many vehicles there were. But I think the main use would be Humvees. But I mean, like I said, any vehicle that would meet that definition would qualify. So I'm not totally up to date on all vehicles that would meet that definition, but it's not just Humvees. We'll say that.
Are there any other questions for the revisor? Seeing none. Committee, you should have received a fiscal note on this with your information. If you have any questions, you can always get a hold of them and talk about it. We have written testimony only on this. Proponents, we have written testimony for the bill provided by Representative Christy Williams, and written testimony in support by the Kansas Department of Transportation. You have that for your information. I have no other proponents listed. Does anyone wish to speak as a proponent? I have no neutral and no opponents listed. Does anyone wish to speak as a neutral or an opponent? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on House Bill 2014. Committee, I would like for you to welcome to the committee for an informational briefing by Secretary Julie Lorenz, Kansas Department of Transportation. Welcome to the committee. We're pleased to have you. We'll give you a moment to get things set up.
It's the infinity. intentional about the way we think about both transportation today and in the future. So I'm going to pause just a minute because I feel like folks may have a hard time tracking with where we are. Okay. Oh, man. So we'll just give it a pause. So when we're back on YouTube, I'll just say transportation, super important. Worth lots of investment and attention. And Chairman, I'll also take my cue from you. If you want me to just keep going, I'm happy to do that as well. Okay. Okay. So we're going to go on to the next segment. Okay. All right. So we've talked a bit about why transportation is important. And now we'll talk about how it's delivered in the state of Kansas. First, a bit about our team at KDOT. We have a little over 2,000 employees. That's about 600 fewer than in 2011. We have about 1,500 employees that are out in the districts. And that is where the preponderance of our staff reductions occurred. So I have some concerns about being able to staff operations like snow removal and sign replacements and those sorts of things. We've made some progress in terms of recruiting. When I first came to KDOT, we had 100% turnover out in the field for new hires. Last year, I'm glad to report that we were able to hire 80 equipment operators and we lost 66. So that is not 100% turnover. We are making some incremental improvements, and we are also looking at things like contract maintenance, because we can't not do our work. We just have to look at doing our work differently sometimes. And we have a little over 600 employees at headquarters. In terms of our highway system, it's important to understand we have a lot of road miles in Kansas, the fourth most in the nation at about 140,000 public road miles. Of those, about 10,000 are state. So when you hear me talk about partnerships with locals, with cities and counties, it's super important because it doesn't do us any good to have a great state system if people can't get to it on city streets or on county roads. So the system has to work together as a system. We have about 25,000 bridges. Of those, 5,000 are state bridges. And I want to call your attention to the fact that over $600 million of freight is transported on our highways each and every day on average. That's a whole lot of money that we need to make sure our highways can accommodate. It's also important to recognize that traffic is not proportionate to miles. So while the counties have 80% of the roads, they have about 7% of the traffic, and we have about 50% of the traffic and 7% of the roads. So important to note that it's disproportionate use. We're not just about highways, though. We provide investments from the state in modal programs, about 11 million in transit, 5 in aviation, 10 in rail, and 2 in bike and ped. Transportation is funded in Kansas. This is a graphic that shows you. So where you see the gray boxes, those are what we would call protected sources. They go into the state highway fund and they are not transferable. They are only available for transportation purposes. The blue box, the sales tax, comes directly into the state highway fund, but can be reappropriated at the direction of the governor and legislature. It's important to note motor fuels tax. Remember, I was talking about the systems perspective. Motor fuels tax comes into the state highway fund, and 1/3 of it then goes out to cities and counties through the Special City County Highway Fund. So that is a quick view of what the mechanisms look like in terms of dollars. We receive about $1.75 billion per year, and of that, about 1/3 comes from sales tax, and about 24% from the feds, and about 24% from motor fuels tax. Important to note, last year, because we didn't have as much traffic, we lost about $37.5 million in motor fuels tax. I'll talk a bit about that at the end when I talk about some relief funds that have come from the feds. And we spend about 1.65 billion per year. About half of that goes into construction, and about 10% goes into maintenance, and you can see the distribution from there. I would also point out debt service is a part of what we have to pay, and we see our debt service declining over time, so I'd like to point that out. Snow and ice removal. The first year I was here, it was a really bad winter. Last year was better, and this year continues to be better. We don't have the totals in quite yet for the New Year's Eve storm. That was expensive because we were paying people double time. But you can see here about what we spend on snow and ice removal each year. This is one of the not bright spots of the year in terms of fatalities. So typically fatalities track with traffic. So the more traffic you have, just sort of as a function of more traffic, you have more fatalities. This year, we have seen less traffic, but fatalities are up. What we're seeing are really high rates of speed. It's almost as if highways are not as busy, and you see fatalities at over 100 miles per hour. So that's concerning also. And I don't have documentation of this, but my sense is you see more distractions. People are worried about COVID and other things, and I just think we're also seeing more distracted driving. And we are certainly seeing in the urbanized areas more pedestrian fatalities. So something to make note of. I am concerned about that. I hope we start seeing that come down as we sort of return to normal. One thing that we worked on through the fall and are glad to roll out today is a new mission, vision, and values. And sometimes those just feel like window dressing. But at KDOT, we take it seriously. We want to think about what are we trying to invest in to achieve for taxpayers. This isn't our money. This is taxpayers' money that we need to put to good use. So we will deliver a modern, efficient, and resilient system for users. And that's what's so important, businesses and our partners. And I want to call out 3 values that we're very focused on. Customer service. And Chairman Prail serves on the KTA board along with me, and he knows how focused KTA is on customer service, and that is the direction we're headed at KDOT, is to listen to our partners, and I'll talk a bit more about that. Money matters. We know that we have the responsibility to deliver a great system and to pay good attention to the way that we're using funds, and I'll talk about that. And teamwork, internally and externally. You get so much more done if you're all pulling on the same rope, in the same direction, at the same tempo, and we are trying to be good partners with construction companies and with cities and counties, with the legislature. It is all about teamwork. Now, when I talked about measuring, right now we do a good job measuring our system, like the hard stuff, like the concrete and the pavement. And I could talk about that. I could bring engineers in and they could really talk about it. But where I think we need to spend more time is thinking about the user experience. Are our customers happy with the kinds of things we're delivering? So in cities and for trucks, what do their delays look like? How about dedicated law enforcement hours? Those are the kinds of things we're going to measure and be bringing back to you time and time again, and also in our budget committees. So, thank you. We're going to start talking a little bit about the IKE program. Thank you all for passing IKE, and I always want to say, with 4 hours to spare. We got that passed right before the legislature went home. We had 4 hours to spare, and it has been incredibly important and helpful to have that framework to guide the investments that we're making. It's $9.9 billion over the next 10 years. It strengthens infrastructure. For the first time in legislation, it's required that we put preservation first after bond payments, and it provides more economic growth opportunities across the state. I look forward to working with all of you to deliver that program. And the thing I think that I am especially thankful for is it is the kind of thing that's bipartisan. It passed with over 94% approval. And it's good for urban areas and it's good for rural areas. It is the thing that we can talk about and take pride in. And I am so thankful to have that program to work from. And I sincerely thank you. We're working under 3 principles at KDOT. And the first is partnerships. I've talked about the importance of working with industry and with communities. And you're going to see how that plays out in our partnership programs. And this is a good example. We kept the best programs from T-Works and we added some new ones. Things like Preservation Plus and more broadband and the cost share program. I'll talk about those, but those are all programs where we work with locals to try to expand and leverage our dollars, whether it's getting broadband across the state, more cost of locals to bring some money to the table. As you may recall, we go. Okay. All right. As you may recall, we've talked about the declining health in pavement, and sometimes what you see is not what you get. So what you see on the left is a highway that looks like it's in pretty darn good shape. I believe it's 383. But if you look underneath it, those core samples that you can see are crumbling show you that it's not in good repair. So you will see us setting targets related to pavement preservation that take the health of the system into consideration. This is our top priority for investment in rebuilding. It's on that preservation side. For those of you who are new to the committee, the state highway system is worth north of $30 billion. It's one of the state's most valuable assets, and we need to make sure we're taking good care of it. This is one of the reasons that transportation is so very important and vital to the state. This is an example of the investments that we're making and the jobs that it then creates as you look at investments in jobs and the economy. So this is, I think this is lettings. Yes. Oh, that's backwards. All right, so these are payouts, which means this is money that goes directly into the economy in a year. The next one is construction lettings, because we are on a 3-year window. Generally, we are letting projects that we know are not going to necessarily start for a year or so, and they pay out over 3 years. So it's two different views of how work gets done. Options. It is so important to have options, whether you're talking about different modes or the ability to move funds to different projects. But it's when you have options that you can be more nimble. It's also when you sit down with a community to figure out a problem. If you only have one answer, it doesn't give you many ways to move about and solve problems. I'm very, very pleased with the options that we are able to work with. And one of the things, going back to ks.gov culture, I talk about a whole lot, is don't start with no. The community comes to us with a problem. Don't start by saying, no, we can't do that. Let's start by saying, like, let's really take a look at this problem. What can we do? So important. Think about your options. All right, let's talk about this cost share program. So while you love all your kids, and I love all my programs, sometimes you have one that just is maybe get your attention a little more, and cost share is my baby. We got that set up in 92 working days. It is a fantastic opportunity because it allows communities to bring a little money to the table, and these funds can be used on either the state system or the local system. So far, we've invested $65 million, and locals have brought $42 million to the table. That's a great return on our investment. We're leveraging it like crazy. Sedgwick County is a good example on the North Junction project, and that is a good example of we just don't say quit. We could never take the bite of that whole apple and chew it all at once, but we keep doing a little bit at a time, a little bit at the time. The latest example is $22 million from KDOT and $7.5 million from Wichita. We're just going to keep working at that till we get that project taken care of. Now, I also, for Representative Prail, want to talk about a project in Parsons, because I like this project a lot. It's on 21st Street. It's 2 bridges on 21st Street. Structurally pretty good, but the decks needed to be replaced. Unfortunately, they didn't really qualify for any KDOT program, and they didn't qualify for federal money. So too bad, so sad. Until cost share came along. Cut out that red tape. KDOT put in $500,000, Parsons put in $175,000. Those 2 bridge decks are being redone. That's a good story. Here's why it's even more important. So, and you gotta love this name. So this is literally, the fire chief's name is Jay Hawks. So Jay Hawks is here to tell you the reason that those 2 bridges are really important is because that is the road that takes you to the hospital. And if that road was to be shut down, it's a 3-minute detour. And if you have a medical emergency, 3 minutes really just might matter. So this is a good example of solving a problem for a community. They bring a little, we bring a little, and we make life a little bit better. All right, 2 years ago, I heard in House Commerce some concerns around aviation. Our CAPE program, the airport improvement program, going really well, but they're like, could you please do a little more around economic development and aviation, where they are capital of the world? I was glad to announce this fall that we now have the first supersonic corridor available in America for commercial testing. I also want to be super clear, not us that allows the permit that goes through FAA and others, but we worked with FAA so that we can market that corridor. It takes good advantage of the skill sets that are available, aviation skill sets, highly trained workforce in the Wichita area, and it might be a good economic development attractor. Oh, I should also point out on the drone side of the house, things are going really well in that we were the first state in the nation to be authorized for beyond line of sight flight. So drones can be, you don't have to be able to see the drone, but some human has to see it. Often the distance, some human eye has to be on it. We have a partnership with K-State, and for the first time, we were able to demonstrate that a drone flew by itself with no one watching it. It had to watch out for birds and bugs and everything. Again, we are working hard to maintain our prominence as aviation capital of the world, which leads us to problem solving. You have to be good partners. You have to have options to solve problems. We're here to work for people. And I want to end with this Belle Plaine example. This is such a good story. 1,500 community, 1,500 people. BNSF came in years ago and added a second track. They have about 10 trains per hour, 24 hours a day, and they have to blow their whistle. 2 long, 1 short. 10 times every hour. Interrupts sleep, interrupts football practice, church, wedding vows, on and on. That community worked super hard to come up with $100,000. KDOT put in $66,000. They spent 6 years collecting this money. We came up with $66,000. So now we will be able to build this it's like a safe median barrier is I guess what you would call it. So now the trains won't have to blow their horns. That again is a good example of helping Kansans have a better life by working on their problems, whether they're highway or not. So with that, I'd like to move into the last segment about economic recovery. We have a role to play to help our state recover. Transportation investments, they create good jobs right now. That's important, but I'm also here to tell you that they have lasting good impacts. You get value that lasts on and on, a public good that lasts a long time. There couldn't be a better picture than this picture of the Amelia Earhart Bridge. It was built as part of the WPA years ago in Atchison. We are working with a stimulus prep team made up of KDOT and consultant engineers and contractors to push us to move faster so that we'll have projects that are ready for stimulus. I can't think of a better investment for long-term value and short-term impacts than transportation. So I want to talk a little bit about our stimulus pipeline. We had a we had an empty pipeline. T-Works projects had been put on hold. This year in April, when we announced projects, we had 13 in the pipeline that could be let in 12 months. We've quadrupled that. And you can see the dollars that are associated with that. But within fiscal year 2023, we would be able to let 133 or more projects. Why is that important? Because under ARA, projects had to be shovel ready. We don't know what the constraints are going to be, what the strings are going to be that comes with stimulus, but we want to be ready. We have every reason to think that under a Biden administration, there will be some funding for a new infrastructure bill. When that happens, how that happens, we don't know, but by having options and being nimble, we'll be able to take full advantage of those dollars. Which leads me now to the next piece, which is related to COVID relief funding. Okay, so big stimulus, I'm hoping for big dollars. We don't know what that's going to look like. But we did get some COVID relief money at the end of December. Okay, so that, I want you to be clear, those are two different things. We looked at lots of options for how we might use this money. Now you'll see it says there 84 million. It was really more like 94 million, but right off the top, about 10 million gets split between Kansas City and Wichita. Those go right to the MPOs, so that's not under our purview, so I'm not going to speak to how they would use those dollars. But the 84 million for which we're responsible, first thing, remember I talked about preservation as our top priority. We would invest 25 to 40 million in preservation. The next, and that is, again, it's important for the short term and the long term. The second is we would put more money in the local partnership projects. So for example, at Local Bridge, we received applications for $46 million. We were able to fund $8 million. There's clearly a need in those partnership projects. You'll see I've got a range there, 10 to 15. I'm going to see what the quality of the applications are. If we get really great applications, we'll put it in at 15 million. If they're not so great, we'll go at 10 million. The other thing I want to point out is that we want to be good partners. We're not, so for communities that have been really impacted by COVID and have a high unemployment rate, like Lindsay's not going to negotiate as hard at them for a match. We will give some consideration, a bonus point or two for those communities that have really suffered. So we won't look to communities that don't have as much money to bring to the table because their budgets have suffered. They'll have to have a match, but we're not going to hold them to the same high standard. And also, I would point out, we're going to take, remember I talked about 37 million motor fuels tax had been lost? We're going to make everybody whole. We would keep about 25 million and take that 12 million and send that out to cities and counties because they've lost those motor fuel funds. Now, this is something that I am really proud of and I think is really important, and it's cutting the red tape that comes with these federal dollars. It was interesting, I had my time over in the recovery office. We literally had nursing homes that declined federal money because of all the requirements for reporting. Well, we've now got some federal dollars that we want to share with locals, but we're not going to, what we're going to do is we're going to send them state dollars like they would have gotten under motor fuels tax. So they don't have to worry about all those reporting requirements, and we'll take care of the reporting requirements. So we're going to cut out that red tape, send them state dollars, keep those federal dollars, because we have the processes in place to manage that reporting requirement. If I learned anything, it's that funding that's wrapped up in red tape is not relief. And we want to help those cities and counties be able to move forward. So with that, I wish I would have had more of a crescendo in my voice. So with that, I'm ready for questions.
Representative Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary Lorenz, for all of your work on behalf of Kansans across the state. When we were talking about the stimulus money, you'd said that the decrease in fuel sales tax was approximately $37.5 million. Was there also an increase in sales tax over what the original projections were last year? Is that 37.5 net of sales tax increase?
It is not net. It is what we lost in motor fuels tax.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Further questions? Representative Helgerson.
Madam Secretary, thank you very much. Broadband, we've gotten federal funds that came through in the COVID relief plan, I believe. How did that work with the broadband? Was it 5 or 10%? Does that mean we've far expanded it? If you could give us a little bit more information.
Sure. So I believe the relief funds that came in, 60 million was allocated to broadband. Of that, 50 million was actually fiber, and 10 million was for appliances, I guess is the way to say that. So the 50 million is being deployed. That's the relief money. The 5 million that comes from KDOT was transferred, it's co-administered with KDOT and Commerce. Those applications are being accepted. The period may have already closed, but the applications were opened in December. So it just means we're able to do more. Now that is separate and apart from Preservation Plus. So we got the broadband money that's more focused on sort of middle mile, maybe a little bit last mile. On the KDOT side, the Preservation Plus is much more middle mile. So that's like when we open a trench, we invite the private sector to come in so that it's more cost effective for them to get fiber across the state. It helps us connect our 800 megahertz towers. It helps us think about how we can have better communication systems. We've got an upcoming wind alert project that'll be let pretty soon. So we're very focused on using technology for safety as it relates to broadband across the state. That's that part. The 5 million that goes to Commerce is, I would say, sort of more community, middle last mile. Make sense? Happy to get more information for you if that's. Okay, sure.
Representative Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for the presentation today. Could you talk just a little bit about the decision-making process inside the department as to, on the 10-year plan, what gets prioritized, how you pick a project, and how do communities get transparency or visibility into that process?
Absolutely, great question. So we have 3 primary pots of money. Preservation is our largest, average annual 500 million. And then we have modernization, so that's like adding a turn lane, that sort of thing. And then expansion, which is a big add-on to the system. So that might mean like going from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, okay? Preservation is selected annually. It's based entirely on engineering factors driven primarily by pavement, but we also take a look at safety, traffic, that sort of thing. On the modernization and expansion projects, we look on the expansion side at 50% on engineering, 25 on local input, and 25 on economic analysis. And on the modernization piece, it's 80% on engineering and 20% on local input. We seek local input now every 2 years. So we'll be going out, I think we've targeted September this year in hopes that we'll be through the virus part and we'll be able to do that in person. Under Ike, under the Eisenhower Legacy Transportation Program, it's fundamentally different in that the previous 3 programs had a 10-year set list of projects. If you got on the list, good news, you were good to go to get your project sometime. What we saw was under T-Works that not all those projects got done. So those were moved, those are going to be delivered under Ike, and instead we're moving to a 2-year rolling program such that you put projects into the development pipeline, and then you take a look at your construction budget, and you pull 2 years worth of projects out to build. You then put more into the development, and then you thus have a rolling program. That way you always have a pipeline. You have projects on the shelf that are under development. It also gives you more opportunity to address emerging both challenges and opportunities. That was a problem under previous programs, is that what you don't have a perfect crystal ball for 10 years out, right? So now we can be much more nimble. But back to your point, locals are invited in every 2 years in consultation with us to talk about which projects are rising to the top within their region. So we look at regional investment because every community is going to have their project and they have the right to advocate for that project, but we can't fund all the projects. So we have to have some regional collaboration and discussion.
Thank you. If Mr. Chairman, if I could just.
Sure.
So that process inside your department where you guys are lifting those projects out of the development pipeline and into the construction pipeline, who are the decision makers? Is that, do you have like a panel, a board? Do people come in and advocate?
No. So what we have done right now is we know we've got these T-Works projects to deliver. We just announced in April the project's about $1.6 billion that's going into the pipeline because it was dry. We have not announced any Ike projects for construction. What we'll be taking a look at are several things. One, a look at sort of like phasing and scoping. So Polk Quincy is a great example. It's a $400 million project. However, Topeka is taking a look at, should they issue some bonds to help bring some money to the table, or could we look at replacing the viaduct but not the approaches, which gets it down to a $200 million project. It's a lot easier lift to do a $200 million project than a $400 million project. Passing lanes are another great example for safety, where communities want 4 lanes. It is very expensive. We can't get there fast enough, but if they're willing to talk about passing lanes, it's probably something we can get to sooner than later. So we also score these projects when we go out to local consult. We share scores with communities so they understand in sort of a relative sense what sort of that need is as their projects compare to others.
Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, as you were talking, I was thinking about snow and removal and what it was, how this time last year was really bad. So from that fund, wherever the snow and removal is, that can be shifted when you're not spending the money. Am I correct? In other words, bridges, we were way behind on bridges. We were not repairing bridges as we had been before, and I think it was about a 5 or 6 year period of time we got behind. So
Yeah.
at one point,
So,
that's what I want to mean.
so I think I think if you're saying like, so if we save a little money in a year on operational costs, can we put that somewhere else into the construction program? Do we have the flexibility? Yes, but what really ends up usually happening there is sometimes we wait to see what happens on the snow side. If we don't spend all of our money on snow, then we'll go out and buy equipment that we need. So we kind of try, it's not that much money, but we're pretty tightly budgeted. So if we have a little extra in the snow budget, we usually go out and buy equipment, and we just hold on purchasing equipment so that we can see if we can meet the snow removal needs. So that snow removal piece that I was talking about, it's in that 10% of maintenance, 158 million per year. So it's like not enough to really do major bridge repairs. That's why we have to be really careful and intentional about those preservation dollars. So those are the construction dollars.
So did we allow more money this year in the new 10-year plan, the Ike plan, did we allow more to make up for what we had not been doing?
Yeah, okay, so there you go. Okay, so what you see now is an average annual investment of 500 million in preservation. Of that, about 350 is highways and 150 is bridges. So we should start, we are working on our backlog. I think I'm getting here to the answer of the question.
It was me asking the back way to get to this, so I should have asked it up front. Now, the other thing, with those projects that we did not have done in the other plan, and we said we were going to finish those before how have we done on?
How are we doing on that? Okay, so I love the question. We have on our website now, you can track our progress on each one of those projects by phase. We are currently scheduled to be able to deliver one part of each of those projects by the end of 21. And we are making good progress on those. Where we have a couple of holdups, it's on right-of-way acquisition on a couple, but we've gone from, I feel like we had like 21 projects and we're down to 18 now. So we're making good progress on them. We're knocking them out. We're knocking them out because they're closer to ready than the ones that we just put in the pipeline.
Well, that's good, because you had said before when you were here, we'd make sure we took care of those, because some people had been waiting a long time,
Yeah.
8 or 9 years, getting up until this 10 and over. So that was good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
Representative Del Perdang.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm up here.
This is the first time I've had a hearing like where it's like 360, like in the round.
I've got a couple of questions, actually.
Sure.
A couple of questions, and I promise I'm going to start out real easy, but then we'll get a little difficult. On the first one, you touched on education on page 2. You had a picture of the school bus. I'd like to hear your opinion, and it's just an opinion, but as far as seat belts on school buses. Okay, moving to the next question.
Well, I would have to, I'd need to do a little research on that, to be super honest. I don't know what the research suggests, so.
I didn't know if you had one or not. It's just something that's intrigued me. So, and I'm good with that. So, you talked about the revenues partway through page 14, but I'd just be curious, this past fiscal year, how many dollars were robbed from the Bank of KDOT?
And Joel, I need confirmation here. So I believe, so in FY21, I have 265. Of that, 158 is extraordinary. And there's a distinction here. So when T-Works was funded and we carried it forward into Ike, there are these ordinary transfers. So these are things like paying for the highway patrol. And some goes to revenue because they collect motor fuels tax. And I think it adds up to about 105. 105 is about what I think is sort of ordinary. So we kind of bake that in each and every year. So then the extraordinary is the on top piece. That's what I have, and I want to, that's what I have in my notes. It's 265 of that. 158 is extraordinary. Now, in extraordinary, there are things like State House renovation. there's still some mental health. So there are some, that's why we call them extraordinary, because they're not things you would typically think of as specifically transportation related.
The number seems smaller than what it was going back.
No, and we are, and the governor has said that she wants to close the bank of KDOT, and you continue to see, that's why you saw the lettings are up, payments are up, making progress on the bridges, knocking the T-Works projects out. It's because we have to see that transfer decline over time, and we have been seeing that.
Third question, I've heard all kinds of conflicting on this, and I think you've been touching on it, but are all of the T-Works projects completed or not?
No.
Thank
They
you.
are, will they be? Yes. Are they currently? No.
About how many are still?
So I think there are, we have it on our website, I'm going to say 18.
And there was how many to begin with?
I feel like 24.
Okay, I was saying 23.
23, 24, we've got 18 left, we're making progress on them. One phase of each will be let by the end of this year, but we are committed to completing all of those.
How is the, and I'm not familiar with the Ike program.
Oh, I could talk for days about it, so you just ask.
Is it different from T-Works or
Yes.
is it a continuation maybe of T-Works?
Well, that's a good question, kind of both. So remember, I said we kept the best of the old and then we added some new. So the things that were working really well, like local consult, that works really well. We're just doing more of it. Cost share is new. Preservation, good, old, need to keep it. Keep doing it the way we've been doing it in terms of using the priority formula. I could tell you about this priority formula. It's been in place for a really long time. It analyzes 10th mile road segments all across the 10,000 miles, builds into logical segments that are constructible and are optimized for getting good bid prices. I mean, I could get somebody else in that's way better than me at that, but we kept the best. Airport Improvement Program, we kept it at $5 million. It's really important for air ambulance service. So we want people to be able to get air ambulance service within 30 minutes. Everyone should have access to air ambulance service, regardless of the weather. So under T-Works, when T-Works started, we said, oh, everybody's got air ambulance service on a clear day. Well, that, like accidents just don't happen on a clear day. So we invested quite a bit in lighting systems and in, I guess, radar systems. Anyway, navigation systems. So now we have seen our metrics improve considerably. So like we kept the CAPE program, we kept the best of the old, and we got some new stuff.
Chairman, I promise, last question. You made a comment that really grabbed me, and I appreciated you saying that, but it says, do not start with no. I like that. But now I'm going to put, I also sit on the utilities, and we got the chairman sitting over here too. I've been, in many instances, I could recall to you where the KDOT, first off, shares the right-of-ways with telecom providers. You talked about fiber optic routes, et cetera, et cetera. There are communities that I've seen along the eastern corridor, getting close to where our chairman resides, where they have needed access to the fiber routes. And since it's a shared fiber, in other words, you might get a company, I'll pick on AT&T. AT&T puts this fiber in, it's 140 some strands. They will lease out certain parts of it. The community wants to hook into it, and they are immediately told no. How do we get around that? How do we allow these communities that need broadband to access the fiber that's right there but through their community, and they're being told no?
Well, I'd say we need to sit down and talk about
I
it.
would love to. Thank you.
Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary Lorenz, for being here with us today. My question has to do with the State Highway Fund. Can you comment a little bit about how the Highway Fund's been affected by the COVID-19 this past year, and maybe less people driving and consuming fuel and using fuel, and how that's impacted the Highway Fund?
Sure. So I'd go back to the comments about $37.5 million reduction in motor fuels tax. So that is tax on gasoline, essentially. And what I would also say is we have, while certainly on the passenger vehicle side, we've seen a decrease in traffic for sure. What we've seen, though, is not as much decline in big, heavy trucks. So, and they also pay gas tax. So that has, it's sort of been ameliorated by heavy trucks, and we all know e-commerce is like crazy, so we see lots of truck traffic. Also should point out that trucks provide more wear and tear on our highways than passenger vehicles. So the 37.5, because of the COVID relief funds that came in at the end of the year, that we, say we're going to keep some for us at the rate that we would have expected and share with the locals, because they get about a third of that motor fuels tax.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that response. And also, do you have any concern with the rising gas prices that are being forecasted because of federal policy?
Oh, more than that. So yes, but I think there's a longer term view that needs to be taken, which has very much to do with electric vehicles. So was it 2 years ago we passed a registration fee for electric vehicles? It's not significant. It's not raising significant amounts of dollars, but I'm very thankful to have that in place. I think under the Biden administration, we are going to see significant focus on encouraging electric vehicles. And I got a text today, and I think it's GM, pretty sure GM, that has said by 2035, they're not going to make like gas-powered SUVs and something else. So like it's coming faster than I would have even thought 2 years ago. So it is imperative that we keep an eye. We cannot think that motor fuels tax is going to be the resource that it is today forever.
Representative Minnix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Lorenz, I applaud the flexibility with the IKE program. I'm going to ask you to put on your future hat a little bit. Is there any hopes or plans of further toll roads in the state of Kansas?
Well, thank you.
Such as Highway 83 north and south, possibly.
Well, now, I was going to say, we actually have a toll feasibility study going on right now on US 69 in Johnson County. And so it's, and I want to be really clear on the toll legislation, and the way that works is that anything that's free today, and none of us really think free is free, because everything is actually supported by taxes. But anything that you drive on for free now will remain free. It's just new capacity, new lanes would be tolled. And so we're doing a study on US 69, and I'd be welcome to, I would love to come back and share more information on that. But it's essentially you pay to drive in the new lane, and you price it to keep it free flowing. It's very traffic dependent. You have to have enough traffic to build new lanes and pay for those new lanes, or at least a portion of those new lanes. So I just say we'd have to look at the traffic, but it's very traffic dependent, and I don't think there are going to be many places in the state that it will actually pencil out.
Thank you very much.
Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam Secretary, for being here today. I wanted to dovetail on Representative Howell's question about electric vehicles. I believe it was last year, or perhaps 2 years ago, we passed a bill for adding a registration fee of, I believe, $150.
125, 150, that's certainly ballpark.
I know we started at 300 and it kind of got worked down a little bit. Were those dollars earmarked for the highway fund? And if so, do you have a dollar amount on what we've collected so far?
I'll have to get back to you. Those are included in registration fees that are in the gray box, so those are protected. I don't have a number. It's not huge, but I'll get you. I will answer the question. Sure.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Hauser. He's on his cell phone. Let's see if he's going to come in for us.
I didn't have a question, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Seibert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam or Secretary Lorenz. Speaking about, the fees on electric vehicles for road, years ago they had fees for propane vehicles and you paid a one-time charge. Is $50 significant enough to even make a difference? Because a lot of vehicles are going going to electric. Like you said, if they're 2035, you know, vehicles are getting a lot better gas mileage instead of 10 mile to the gallon. Do those need to be up? Because otherwise, who's going to be paying for the roads?
You are raising an important and good question. The way we fund transportation, we need to, you know, I'm thankful we got the Ike program passed. It feels solid, but those are not things that we should ignore. We should probably take a look at thinking about what the long-term funding for transportation looks like.
I know we give incentives to get a lot of this renewable stuff done, but it comes a point in time, it's got to start having to fund itself, doesn't it?
Well, like I said, I think it's something we need to take a look at. Because I don't know how much it generates, so I have a hard time answering that.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? See none? Secretary Lorenz, thank you very much. I will put you on the list to, I heard you say you'd be willing to come back, so.
Oh, yeah. Yes, and you know, I've got more stories. I've got some history on Eisenhower. You just, you know, we could do a Friday afternoon webinar. Let me know.
Thank you. Thank you. Committee, next week, we do have a meeting scheduled for Tuesday, and my plan is to work the two bills that we've heard, 2107 and 2014. And watch your emails because we will be scheduling hearings on Wednesday. We had to wait for them to get read in, and then, but we will have hearings on Wednesday. Is there any further things that might need to come before the committee? Seeing none, we are adjourned.